Hello again, everyone. It's Mr. Most Days Off, and I am here, right here, on thefanspodcast.com. And I am very happy today to announce that we are bringing you a brand new podcast reviewing The Simpsons. We're going to go back in time all the way to 1989 with Season 1 to review these episodes chronologically and just talk about one of the greatest animated sitcoms of all time. Today we're going to be doing the first episode ever, Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire, and Bart the Genius. But before I get too far ahead of myself, let me introduce you to the co-host with the most, Richie the Whiz Kid.
Thanks for that throwout. I am Richie the Whiz Kid, here with Mr. Most Days Off, the man, the myth, the magical Mr. Mistopheles, if you will. It's Miles over there. And I'm a little bit excited about this, actually. The Simpsons holds a very special place in my life and in my heart, and I'm excited to be talking about the first two episodes.
Yeah, man,
today.
it's gonna be fun. Like I said at the top of the show, we're gonna be going back and we're gonna be doing these all the way through, two at a time. And what's really cool about this for me, I mean, I think I can speak for both of us. We're both Simpsons fans from pretty early off in this show. I don't remember watching it from the pilot per se. I mean, let's see, I would have been 4 years old at this time. I was born in 1985, so I mean that's not quite old enough to get it, but I remember being not too old and watching this cartoon with my parents, actually, because I think they were just like, oh, a cartoon show we can watch together, that's fine. Bart Simpson was like my idol going back at that time.
That makes so much sense about the way you've turned out in life, too.
It works out, man. He was a good role model, what can I say? But yeah, it's really neat to be able to go back and watch some of these because I have not watched them in so long. I'll tell you right here. I was a big fan in the 90s. I watched it all the time, every Sunday. I pretty much stayed like that all the way through the 2000s as well. But I did kind of. I haven't really watched many, if any, coming from about season 21. I got busy on Sundays and couldn't really get into it as well. Also, just because it had been going on a very long time. But I was an uber fan for the first 20 seasons. I own all of them. I just haven't gone back to watch some of the early ones in a really long time. So going back to revisit these, I didn't really remember these episodes a whole lot. I mean, I know that I had seen them, but like some of the memorable quotes and things that came from this show, I had forgot were in these episodes.
Yeah, that's the great thing about the show, though. I mean, I believe a lot of the writers on this show were from Harvard, places like Harvard, so there's a lot of intelligence in the show that you can go back later in life and catch things you didn't notice before, at least in the earlier seasons. I'm like you, once you get over like 500 episodes, when it used to be can't miss TV, it starts to become a little missable after that time. I mean, there's only so much The Simpsons can do. I mean, South Park even did a Simpsons Did It episode because The Simpsons have literally done everything.
I believe the cast of The Simpsons sent Matt and Trey flowers after that episode aired, if I remember. I think I read that somewhere, and I always thought that was really cool.
That makes me love both shows even more.
Yeah, it's really neat that they're both, like, they were able to kind of, like, set ego aside and just have fun with each other. Unlike Family Guy, in which they got into, like, a blood feud, it seemed like. It's really neat. I mean, but The Simpsons is a powerhouse. They know that no one can touch them. I mean, at the end of the day, regardless of what your favorite adult animated cartoon is, it's got to at least give some credit to The Simpsons for getting the ball rolling, because this was one of the earlier series that did anything like what this did.
Well, yeah, and it's in syndication in other countries nowadays where, Brazil has big festivals with The Simpsons, I believe, if I watched the special about 5 or 6 years ago, where The Simpsons is a big deal, like, all around the world, and it's crazy to see people fall in love with them. Now, of course, a lot of it's because a lot of other countries think that Homer Simpson represents an American pretty spot on.
Yeah, that's true.
So that plays into that, but I mean, it's kind of true in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's a parody of something for sure, and I mean, you can't have parody without an example of something to parody. But you'd spoken about it earlier. It's been around for so long. We're in the 27th season, and there's been 614 episodes, according to one Internet Movie Database. That's a fucking lot, man. I remember watching the 200th episode back on TV live. I believe, if I remember correctly, and I may be fucking this up, but I'm pretty sure it had both Tony Hawk and Blink 182 guest star.
I think that was the 300th.
Was that the 300th? I thought that was the 200th.
I think so.
But yeah, that might have been the 300th.
We need somebody Do we have a fact checker?
Yeah,
in here
somebody look
somewhere?
that up and let us know, please. But either way, 200th or 300th, I remember that from when I was in like middle or like early high school or late middle school, somewhere in that. But I remember watching that live and being like, "Wow, this show's been on forever."
And then you were like, wow, you can get a divorce from your parents. But we should wait until we hit the 300th or I guess the 150th podcast for that one.
Yeah, we're totally gonna get there, man. We're totally gonna get there. But yeah, let's get into this first episode. So this episode is Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire, and this debuted December 17th, 1989. What I read this on that same Internet Movie Database that I referenced earlier, but I found it very interesting that this was not the first episode of The Simpsons that was written, or it was not the first episode written. It was the first episode produced. And the reason they jump started with this is because there was a scheduling delay from starting in October. This was supposed to be the 8th episode in December, but instead this was supposed to be the 8th episode originally, and they started with it first because they had to start in December.
Oh, that's really interesting, actually. And yeah, I always have thought that it's weird that a series' first episode was a Christmas episode.
Right. They kind of turned it into a Christmas special, and then the next episode wasn't until January. But they tried to turn Bart the Genius into the pilot of the series, and they called the Christmas episode a Christmas special. But everyone agrees it's the pilot episode. It came out, it launched the show. But that also explains why Santa's Little Helper wasn't around during Bart the Genius.
Yeah.
It turns out, actually, the episode that was supposed to start it was the now last episode in the season, which is Some Enchanted Evening, which is the babysitter episode that I don't think you're super fond of. But that was actually supposed to be the original opening. But anyway, we ended up getting Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire, and this is how we're introduced to The Simpsons. What are your first thoughts on opening? They open going into the school pageant.
I enjoy them opening on the school pageant. You get to see Bart doing his Bart hijinks, singing a classic tune about how Batman smells and Robin laying eggs.
I've got to ask a really dumb question. Is this the first time that song is this like when that song is created, or did that exist beforehand and Bart was just singing it? Because we used to sing that all the fucking time when I was in like elementary school.
It's been around for a long time, man. There are different iterations, I think, like even from my father, possibly.
Okay, I kind of thought so, but I was just thinking how cool would that have been if that was like yet another piece of pop culture history that like lies within The Simpsons.
It wouldn't surprise me at all, and it would make perfect sense, but I'm pretty sure that song's been around since Adam West times.
Fair enough. That makes more sense. So this scene to me, I mean, it was fine. It was a fun way to kind of introduce the idea of the family, but I think it was more of just the way to like roll the credits, and I think the real opening of this is the first scene that we're in the living room, and Marge is actually writing the family's Christmas letter. And it's kind of funny just because everything she's describing, I think she's talking about like, how Homer sends his love and he's like growling over the Christmas decorations and the kids are being rambunctious and things of that nature. And it was just very fun. Very much reminded me almost of like a Roseanne type of show, just, any other sitcom of that day and age. But this was a really fun way for them to get their personalities across in a, quick manner.
I actually felt like this episode as a whole was very reflective of Christmas Vacation.
Yes, I have that written down as well. I think that there is a lot of tie-in with National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. I mean, there's a lot of scenes that are exactly the same.
Yeah. And for those that don't remember, this whole episode's about Homer trying to get extra money to buy presents for the family because Bart gets a tattoo and has to get it removed, and that costs a lot of money.
Yeah, one of the quotes that just absolutely cracked me up during this episode. So as the Wiz Kid pointed out, Bart actually has a tattoo and he gets it removed, and part of the gimmick is the doctor explains that it's going to be a very painful laser removal. And then Bart is sitting on the couch with his arm bandaged, and Lisa is poking him over and over again while Bart kind of growls and tells her to stop it. Then finally Maggie starts poking him, the baby, and of course he's, stop it. But then the part that just accidentally killed me was Homer walks up in between Maggie and Lisa, pokes Bart in the arm and is like, "Hey, what's this?" And it's just so Homer, man. Like, I love that scene right there. Again, that was one of the earlier jokes that just made me really
Yeah,
chuckle.
Homer says pretty early on in this episode, "I'm just a big kid," and that's such like a quick, easy, perfect metaphor for the character of Homer Simpson. I mean, that's literally what he is.
When you say it that way, he really does become more and more my hero.
Well, until the later seasons when he starts acting like Peter Griffin.
Yeah, we're gonna get into that. Definitely, this show transitions so much. Let's talk about that now. Going back to this early season is really weird. Just after seeing, I haven't again, we haven't seen these in a long time. So compared to what the show is today, this was definitely a lot more. I don't mild, maybe not in the sense that it was like they've turned up the raunch per se, which I think to some extent they have, but more so in that like this was a very basic. These were very basic characters, very grounded character development, but somewhere along the line they got pretty insane with some of the plot points.
Yeah, this episode's literally about a father trying to provide for his family, and it's something
Yeah,
that everybody can like. It makes you actually like Homer from the very first moment. He's literally sitting in a mall letting kids sit on his lap repeatedly because he's dressed as a Santa Claus, just trying to make an extra buck. You feel so bad when he goes to get his check, and it's only what is it like $13?
$13, yeah.
You feel so bad.
I don't know that we actually explained, but very much like Christmas Vacation, Homer finds out he's not getting his bonus check, so he actually gets a part-time job as a mall Santa, and it's like one of the most that he has to go through this ridiculously stupid training course, and he has to put up with kids, picking on him. His own son plucks his beard off of him at one point, so he puts up with a lot of. Oh, that was actually another fun quote from Bart where he's like, "Man,
that's one of the most world-renowned quotes of Bart."
You're talking actually about I'm Bart Simpson, who the hell are you?
Yeah.
But I was actually talking about there's a quote right after Bart pulls his beard where Homer's explaining the situation to him in like Santa's little toy shop or whatever, and Bart basically looks up at Homer and is like, "Wow, man, you must really love us to sink so low." And I just thought that was really funny. And again, that's like those little bits that just really concrete in who Bart Simpson is as a person and who Homer is as a person.
I think that actually is like one of the most loving lines in the episode, in the first episode. Like Bart doesn't ever acknowledge his father being a nice guy or doing things for him all the time, and like it's a nasty way of saying it, but that's the character. He's supposed to be like that. But the fact that he says you must love us so much to sink so low, like it's actually I think it's a really sweet line.
I think so too, and I mean, you said it's like kind of a shitty way to say it, but if you've been around kids, man, kids say shitty things, dude. Like they're really brutally honest sometimes, and like maybe at Bart's age of 8, he's a little bit immature in that aspect. But like, man, I've been to the store with like a kid, like the nephew, or I'm sorry, actually, this was one of Emily's old nanny kids. At the store one day, she like the kid basically like blurts out about how like, wow, that lady over there is really fat, and he wasn't trying to be mean. He was just literally amazed with like how large this woman was. It was the first time he'd seen such a robust female. So like shit like that. It's not like they're trying to be hateful, but like Bart is like literally hit with this idea of like, wow, you're willing to degrade yourself for me basically. That's that's touching.
Very true. Very true.
Not that there's anything being wrong being a mall Santa, unless you're a pedophile. But other than that, it's totally fine.
Well, we were talking about the first in this with Bart saying, "I'm Bart Simpson. Who the hell are you?" Didn't wasn't this did Homer say "Why you little" and start chasing him in this for the first time as well, if I remember correctly?
Did he? I didn't know if he did that. I thought he just said, "Come here with me, boy," or something like that. I thought it was in the next one after he was giving Bart the bath that we got the "Why you little" and he chased him down.
It happened in there too, but I wrote down that he said "Why you little" in the first one.
Well, hell, you wrote it down. Let's go with it. That sounds right to me.
To transition here a little bit, this is a big introduction for all the characters, especially Santa's little helper, which I'm a big dog person, so that makes me like the episode already there, especially with Santa's little helper's story. But I wanted to mention some of Bart's friends, particularly Milhouse, and I think Lewis. Is Lewis the black kid? I think his name's Lewis. I don't know if they actually said it in the episode, but just from if my memory serves me correct, man, they are a couple little jerks in the first few episodes.
Oh my goodness, I had this written down in the second episode that Milhouse was a dick.
Yeah, like he's completely different from the way his character turns out after a few seasons.
Yeah, totally. Martin's a dick too, but he's at least somewhat the same. Like he's still just kind of like he becomes less of a fucking narc in later episodes, but He's still a nerd.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in a little bit because that leads to one of the most famous lines of all time with him being a little narc.
Yeah, true story.
But yeah, it's his friends were little jerks, particularly Milhouse, and I mean that's the way kids are. But it's just weird to see Milhouse have the guts to talk like that.
Yeah, it's really weird, and it's like it makes you like realize I don't think that they necessarily thought like, holy shit, we're gonna be around for like the next 27 years at this point, because I think they quickly realize they're gonna need some more characters to work with. We did have the Flanders in this episode though, the Ned Flanders and Rod and Twat. The
Did
brothers,
you almost say
Rod
Rod and
Todd
Twat?
Flanders.
I think you almost said Rod and Twat.
I had it on my mind, so it's possible. But yeah, but we do meet the Flanders in this episode, but other than that, there really aren't. Oh, and I'm sorry, and we also meet Barney and Moe very briefly as well. But these are not characters that we can build solid side stories on at this point. I think they realized with the Milhouse switch that it would make sense for Bart to have
a lackey that he can make do whatever he wants.
Yeah,
that's better since
exactly.
He's a little hellion. But yeah, this episode, like, again, I enjoyed it because it's about them finding Santa's little helper. I actually felt like it was kind of a cool little metaphor, if you will, about how they talk about needing a Christmas miracle, but they don't really get a Christmas miracle, but they do, but it's kind of like a reject Christmas miracle, but that's so...
A loser. If you're a Donald Trump person,
it's
a
so
loser,
Simpsonian,
yeah.
If you will, that like it's so fitting. Actually, for the whole series, it's completely fitting, and it's great that they had that kind of yin and yang in the very first episode.
Definitely, and actually, I know I've already burned through a few of these quotes that I said I really like, but there was another one here that really, this one was more touching than anything, but like a really solidifying moment of this episode that kind of gave it, because at first, honestly, this was very bland. It was a very generic story. I think what set this apart is Simpsons has this miraculous charm about it that like it's really hard to put into words, which I realize is what we're attempting to do right now, but
I'd call it the Scrubs effect.
if I know what you mean by that, where it both makes you laugh, it makes you chuckle. It might not be the funniest show ever, but there's LOL moments. But then there's these moments that just like really touch you and are really touching moments. And in this one, they basically pick up, or Santa's little helper is running away from his owner who's like pissed off that it's a loser. He jumped into Homer's arms, who at first is like, no, I don't want you, blah, blah, blah. But then like they make eye contact. Santa's little helper gives him a lick on the face and he's like, he's a loser. He's pathetic. He's a Simpson. And that really, was a nice moment.
It's I know you're doing a touching moment right there, but actually my favorite quote of this episode is right before that when they're actually watching the dogs race, and Homer says, "I don't want to leave till our dog finishes." And multiple seconds go by, and he goes, "Forget it, let's go." That was my favorite quote by far.
That was a well-timed joke, and the difference between this and Family Guy is that would have gone on for 3.5 minutes of them just sitting there, doing nothing else.
Oh God, yeah, that's a very good point.
But yeah, I thought this was a good start, which is funny because it wasn't supposed to be the start. So that's interesting to me that even though this wasn't technically supposed to be the pilot, the charm that the family had, and I think maybe even being around the holidays helped solidify that, really made an impact. And I mean, immediately, if I were watching this fresh, I would definitely be interested in tuning in for more.
Yeah, it's a good starting point. It's like you said, it's not the best episode. It's not anywhere near the best episode, but it's a good jumping on point, even though it is the beginning, and jumping on points are usually later down the road.
All right, so I think we have talked enough about Simpsons roasting on an open fire. However, before we move on, Richie has the ultimate fanboy collection of knowledge for The Simpsons, and he's going to break down each episode for us, going to the guide. What does the guide say, Richie?
This guide, for those that want to know, is called The Simpsons, A Complete Guide to Our Favorite Family. This book is bent, broke, ripped. I've had this thing probably for almost 20 years. Well, not almost 20, about 15, I would say. I think my dad bought it for me for Christmas one year. This goes through the first 8 seasons of the show, and it's got little tidbits of stuff that you might have missed, the best quotes, introductions to characters. And the one that I thought was funny, and like I know you see this in the episode, but sometimes it happens so fast that you miss it. During the Christmas pageant show on the outside of the school, it actually has a 3.5-star review of the actual pageant that you're about to go see, and it's really funny that there's a review for something that no one's seen yet.
And that they would critique an elementary school play
Yeah,
of a Christmas pageant.
Yeah. But it's just this book has a lot of neat little things like that hidden throughout it. So we'll throw some of those in occasionally. But again, that is The Simpsons: A Complete Guide to Our Favorite Family. After if we get past season 8, we're still doing this. We're just screwed.
Yeah, right on. So that's all for our pilot. Moving on to episode 2, we've got Bart the Genius. This episode aired in January of 1990. So that actually made the pilot the only episode to air in the 80s. This is a very, very 90s show all the way through and through. But this is Bart the Genius. This was, I think, originally supposed to be the second episode, if I'm not mistaken. It still is the second episode, but instead of following the original pilot, which is Some Enchanted Evening, it ended up following Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire. So Bart the Genius, we end up with a lot, or let's go ahead and start at the very beginning. This is a very important moment because this is the first time we ever see the now famous Simpsons opening where we pan through Springfield and meet all of meet all of the Simpsons individually. Also, it's the first chalkboard gag, which is what we open on right off the bat. And I think Richie's got it written down. I think I do too, but I know his book has it right there. So our very first chalkboard gag is
I will not waste chalk.
Awesome. So that in itself is funny, but I think what makes this great is, as we know now, as they go on for 614 episodes, changing this up every single freaking time. Along with the couch gag that we'll get to in a bit, but this was a much longer opening than I remembered. I forgot how much extra tidbits were in this. There's like extra scenes that were just completely cut later on and from the show. For instance, we see a bus stop where the bus just zooms by. There's an extended version of the saxophone ending where Lisa is riding her bike home from school. And we do eventually end up on the couch gag, of course, which has the whole family arriving home at relatively the same time. Homer running away from almost being hit by Marge. In this case, all of the Simpsons jump into the couch. Bart goes flying into the air as he's been popped like a zit. And right before the opening credits end, he comes falling through the front of the screen.
Like you said, very, very long, but it's establishing something that we all can see with our eyes closed when we're trying to sleep every single night.
Dude, have you ever seen on YouTube the live action recreation of the Simpsons opening?
Yeah,
it's so fucking awesome.
Spot on. I love that.
Fucking amazing. Like, the people that took the time to do this, I'm so happy that they exist. It makes me really happy.
That's the power of the Simpsons, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, they're all over everything, but I mean, this was just like dedicated fans who just wanted to make this happen, I'm pretty sure. But moving on into this episode, this is we start out by Bart is actually vandalizing the school. He is painting Principal Skinner saying, "I am a wiener." He misspells wiener. Martin Prince is seen narking to Principal Skinner that one of his fellow classmates is defacing school property. And then we see Bart literally caught red-handed as he had been painting with red paint, and it's very clear that this is not his first encounter going to the principal's office.
Well, and before he does that, isn't that where Martin says that I hope you won't hold a grudge against me, to which Bart retorts with the most famous line arguably in The Simpsons, which would be
"Eat my shorts."
The first time you hear it uttered is in the very beginning of this episode. I also want to point out, too, that if you pay attention in this episode, Principal Skinner's suit changes from purple to blue in like every scene pretty much.
Oh, that's awesome. I honestly didn't even see that. That's crazy.
I noticed that when I was rewatching it. I was like, oh, wow, I guess they just, it is what it is. I mean, the old Ninja Turtles cartoon did that notoriously.
All the time. Yeah, wrong voices a lot too. But yeah, so another interesting tidbit from the IMDb is that the psychologist in this was actually the original drawing sketch art for Principal Skinner. And it was changed to look a little bit more like several of Matt Groening's actual teachers, plus influence from the Life is Hell comic book. I thought that was kind of cool. They got to use some character art, and now it's a trivia section, so that's super neat. Yeah, so Bart gets into the principal's office, and his parents have to come in to meet with the principal as well. There's a really funny moment. It's probably my favorite, probably the joke that made me laugh the most. That The principal explains that the school's property has been defaced. Bart was caught, and they estimate that it was going to cost $75, to which the principal says, I don't think it's fair to the taxpayers to have to cover that cost. Homer replies, yeah, it's a crummy system, but what are you going to do? Marge explains that he in fact means that Homer should pay, to which he cannot believe, but then realizes is the case and does have to pay. But it leads to this psychologist coming out and explaining that Bart is just bored. In the earlier scene, Bart had switched his test with Martin so that he ended up having a genius level score. The psychologist believed that Bart was bored, and we have the new plot line that Bart is going to be attending a genius school where he is free to study at his own will.
Which would be the Enriched Learning Center for Gifted Children, for those that were curious. This is a classic sitcom staple of somebody lying and then having to go along with the lie. People like my dad hate it in sitcoms when people lie because he feels like it's bad in general and it leads to bad things, but I think he would agree that because it's The Simpsons it works and it's funny, since he introduced me to the show and watched it with me every week. This has a good little setup to it, again with the eat my shorts and whatnot, and I actually think this brings a lot of really quick jabs, especially some of the stuff Bart says while he's at the gifted center, that are very pertinent to real life in general, where it's a quick little jab that you laugh at and then you're like, oh wait, that is how life is in real life. And there's actually a couple sweet moments in this episode which you don't always expect, but you should.
Yeah, it's usually a running theme of the show is the love of their family.
It's one of my favorite parts, and it might be my favorite quote on this one. There's two that I went back and forth on this one, but they were asking Bart about how to explain paradoxes, and Bart says, well, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
I thought that was fucking perfect.
Yeah, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, it's a quick little jab, and like the teacher gives him a weird look, and it looks like that she thinks he's wrong, but it's like that's the most poignant thing that's said in this entire episode. Like, if a kid told that to you and you knew they were having issues in school and they're not focusing enough, and they say something like that, well, yeah, this kid's a genius. That makes sense. It made sense to me. I don't know why he got in trouble for it.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So this episode moves on with Bart now in this school. Obviously not a genius, but everyone thinks he's a genius. He actually ends up starting to get picked on because kids are able to trick him with basically really complicated trade offers. He ends up trading like a sandwich for a grape and like 3 drops of milk for a carton. Bunch of bullshit like that. He's more or less the outcast of this school. He ends up having a chemistry experiment where he blows up the lab, and the psychologist, of course, just thinks that he's once again bored because of his mega super genius levels. Again, classic sitcom that this guy's an idiot. But Bart ends up confessing. He misspells the word confession, which I thought was funny during his confession. And we find out that Bart just wants to go back to his normal school.
It's going back to where he blew himself up and turned himself green. I loved when Homer said, I bet Einstein turned himself all sorts of colors before he invented the light bulb.
Yeah, very much a Homer Simpson line. That's a perfect Homer Simpson line right there.
Well, but before he goes to write the confession and everything, I was saying there's sweet moments in this episode. The one I really, really liked is when Homer and Bart are actually playing catch, when Bart's getting real with his dad. And they just have a sweet little moment there where you're like, oh, okay, like he just found out his son's lying, and he is obviously in distress, and they just have their little father-son moment where you're playing catch, which is like that's what everyone wants to do, is play catch with their dad. So it's one of those kind of moments, but they execute it pretty well for such a quick little scene, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I have fond moments of playing catch with my dad, and that was a perfect little sweet Simpsons moment. And there's kind of the antithesis of that in the next scene where Bart has turned himself green. Homer is helping him take it off with turpentine. Bart confesses that he is not actually a genius, and we get Homer doing the why you little and chasing Bart's naked green ass through the house, where he locks himself in his room and reads his comics and chills out until Homer gets tired of beating on the door.
One of the things that the last note I wrote down about this episode is one that is a staple of all sitcoms, and The Simpsons does it pretty beautifully in this one, and that's where like a show establishes that it has to have a reset to the normal sitcom parameters. That's what I wrote down. So Bart's got this elaborate lie going on. Everything's changed. Everything's different. And then in the final moments of the episode, everything goes back to just the way they were at the beginning of the episode, which is something you kind of have to do with the Simpsons, I guess. They're never going to get older, and you always have to have them reset to their normal way. But at the same time, that means they can't ever have true happiness, I guess, besides family.
They're. I've even read. I mean, there's so much stuff about The Simpsons. There's college class dedicated to The Simpsons. Yep. But I even saw one guy's theory that The Simpsons were living in limbo essentially, and that's why they were constantly set in struggling middle class life, because it was basically like the perfect middle of their situation. So they were. It wasn't a good place. It wasn't a bad place. It was just the place that they were, and that's why they. That's why they never age and whatnot. But there's tons of fascinating theories on that. I think it's just a really fun little family show. It's interesting to think at this point we didn't know that. We didn't know that this was going to be a show that the characters didn't age. I don't think there was another show like this beforehand that had kind of set those rules in place.
The Jetsons were on for a while, and so were the Flintstones. They ran for a real long time. So I mean,
fuck yeah, I totally screwed the pooch on that one. You're totally right.
The Flintstones was the longest running animated show at the time.
And the Pebbles never aged in that.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still rare, especially it's almost uncharted territory when it comes to a cartoon show going as long as those two do. But there are shows like South Park where the kids do eventually grow 1 year older, or Stan might be 2 years older because he hates everything now, and he got a birthday party for that. But yeah, I mean, you find yourself in a tough position, and that could be why people aren't necessarily all about The Simpsons so much anymore these days, is because after what you said, 614 episodes.
Yep.
When you have to reset back to normal after every episode, but still come up with new ideas, and you can't go with the typical like them getting older and having newer problems, it gets tough.
You're gonna run out of ideas eventually, right?
Yeah, and they do like make, I think maybe it was The Simpsons. This might be one of the newer episodes where they start drinking milk that gives Bart like testosterone, so he's growing a mustache, and so he starts having those kind of issues. But that's just one episode, and you have to get him back to normal by the end of the episode, and still come up with more ideas later on. So yeah, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, I'm sure, especially if you've got a bunch of Harvard writers having issues with it.
Well, and fucking Conan, man, if he can't make it work.
I was gonna say, yeah, but he left pretty early.
Yeah, totally. All right, man. Well, is there anything from the absolute book of our favorite people?
The complete guide to all the episodes. It was a quick pan towards the end of the episode, and I didn't catch it till I read it in the episode guide here. But it actually showed that the graffiti work that Bart did earlier in the episode of Principal Skinner being a Wiener. I was trying to say it the way that he spelt it.
Yeah.
It was actually now a coveted piece of art. There was like a frame around it, and
a velvet rope. Yeah, I saw
yeah.
that. It had I think it was called The Principal by Bart Simpson or something like that.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's called.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome.
And then I'm not gonna lie, I got up to run to the restroom real quick while I was watching this episode, and I missed a quote that I probably would have written down as my favorite, but it's in here, so I want to read it real quick because it's pretty much how I feel about standardized tests. But it's Mrs. Krabappel when she was getting the kids ready to take the test. She says, "Now I don't want you to worry, class. These tests will have no effect on your grades. They merely determine your future social status and financial success, if any."
Yes, that part made me laugh a lot too.
Oh my god, it's but standardized tests, that's a topic for another day, I guess.
Yeah, but that line in particular absolutely killed me. I almost became one of my quote that I was gonna use, but I just thought it was a little long. But man, really, really funny. But yeah, so that completes the first 2 episodes of The Simpsons. This is going to be a fun journey. I'm really excited to get into these later episodes. Season 1 is good, don't get me wrong, but I do think that it definitely takes a while before The Simpsons really hits its groove. Both of these episodes were really good. It wasn't anything wrong with them, but they weren't at that comedic place that the later episodes get to. I think it takes a little while before this show really finds its complete groove.
Yeah, it takes a while to hit your stride. That's true with every series. They got to get through the introduction of characters and establish the roles of all the side characters, because that's where a lot of the comedy comes from.
We really don't have any side characters yet.
Right. You put the major characters into the surroundings of the side characters, and that's where all the conflict has to come from, basically. So, I mean, like we said earlier, I mean, even in the second episode, Milhouse and Lewis are little assholes to everybody still. So they haven't even been established yet, and there's so many stories later on with revolving around Milhouse where he's not an asshole at all. So It takes a while to get going, but for the first 2 episodes that actually aired, it felt good. It felt, I mean, I guess average would be the best way to describe the first 2 episodes.
Yeah, but average, but keeps you wanting to watch more for sure, I think. So, again, looking forward to the later episodes. Definitely excited to be doing this journey with you on this podcast. Next week, we are going to be going to episode 3 and episode 4, which, by the way, we are going by air date if we didn't make that obvious. But we are going to be doing Homer's Odyssey and There's No Disgrace Like Home.
That's a great episode, too, by the way. I love that.
It is. It is a really good one. If I think that'll be a fun one to talk about. If you want to watch these episodes along with us, it'll be episode 3 and 4. Check it out. Before we get out of here, Rich, I do have a few things to say, but I'll give you the opportunity. Do you have anything you would like to plug?
I would like to plug ourselves for a moment. If you'd like to follow me, I am on Twitter. You can find me at @thewiz_kid23. So that's at @theWizKid23. We do a weekly movie review show, actually, on Mr. Most Days Off's YouTube channel. So look up Mr. Most Days Off, subscribe to him. Please comment on all of our movie reviews. We are going to see Sausage Party this week, like we mentioned earlier. The week after that, we actually need help. There are 2 movies coming out that we're on the fence of which one we should actually go see. War Dogs, which everyone knows War Dogs, Jonah Hill, Miles Teller. It looks like it's going to be funny, but, you know, everything might be in the previews. The other movie is Kubo and the Two Strings. That movie looks like it's going to be probably the best animated movie of the year, and it won't be the most well-known one of the year. We need help deciding which one we should see. So if you watch our videos, please comment with either Kubo or War Dogs. Let us know which movie you'd like to watch us review. We'll let you guys decide, but please comment on Mr. Most Days Off YouTube channel.
Awesome. Thanks so much for talking about our movie review show. I am at Mr. Most Days Off on Twitter, as well as Mr. Most Days Off on the YouTube, as he mentioned. If you'd also like to come over to my channel for some wrestling content, I do a Cruiserweight Classic review each and every Wednesday night. Very worst case, it'll be out there Thursday afternoon. But, if you want to hear my thoughts, opinions, and predictions, which totally just got busted on this last week's episode, my pick to go deep into this tournament just got eliminated, so my bracket's pretty fucked. But if you want to hear my additional thoughts going into round 2, come check me out on Mr. Most Days Off on YouTube. I'd like to take a moment here real quick to give a big thank you to Steve the Fan from thefanspodcast.com. Check him out on Twitter as well, at thefanspodcast. He's launching the show on his network. He gave us the opportunity to come on here and host it. We get to go back and watch one of the best shows of all time and talk about it with you each and every week. Very grateful for the opportunity, Steve. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much.
We look forward to being back with you next week for episodes 3 and 4 on the best darn diddly review show of The Simpsons.